Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week in the Alternate Football Podcast. I'm very happy to see you, talk to you guys today and talk about some of the exciting and fun things that are happening in all the alternative football around the country right now. So, got a lot to talk about. We're talking about the XFL, the Alliance, the Indoor Football League, coaching changes, what I think the Legends should do, all that type of stuff. So it's going to be a big show. Let me get into it. So let's start off with reviewing the Alliance week 3. So in the first game, the Hot Shots went into Utah to play the Stallions. Stallions won 23-15. The Stallions looked very good. The Hot Shots unfortunately lost their starting quarterback, and they had to bring out Trevor McKnight. Although honestly, he looked very good. I haven't seen what's happening in terms of injury yet for uh, Logan, not Logan Woodside, Wolford, for Wolford. So I don't know how long he's going to be out. So the Hot Shots finally have lost a game, but will they continue to lose more, or will Trevor McKnight be able to just pick up and start winning games for the Hot Shots? We'll just have to wait and see what happens. In the second game, Memphis played the Apollos, went into Orlando, and Memphis lost 17-21. And somehow the biggest highlight that I've been seeing everywhere is the freaking dog at halftime. He's gotten more live play than anything else from this league. It's this dog that did the best, the world record for longest frisbee toss, I think is what he got, which, I mean, it was awesome. But I mean, let's talk about how well their Apollo's offense with Garrett Gilbert is than a dog. But hey, whatever will get this league to have some good news for them besides what's been going on this week. In the next game is the first Alliance game I was actually able to attend. I have mentioned on here before that I am an Atlanta Legends season ticket holder. So I did go to the Atlanta Legends versus the Birmingham Iron. Birmingham came in and won 28-12. So let me just talk a little bit about my experience of the game at Georgia State Stadium and what I think is going to be happening. So it was announced today that Rich Bartell, who was, I'm not sure if he's if he was the offensive coordinator or just the play caller or something. I don't know. I don't know anything about him. But apparently he was the man calling the plays for the Atlanta Legends, which, yeah, he should have resigned. I'm surprised he didn't get fired sooner. So being a Legend season ticket holder, I was cheering for the Legends. I try not to be a homer, as it were, in my analysis of games, but I was cheering for the Legends. So what I think should happen with the Legends, I started looking into some of the stats for quarterbacks in the Alliance right now to see if Matt Sims is really the problem. I don't think he's really the problem. There are so many problems with the Legends that it doesn't matter if you have Tom Brady as a quarterback. It won't matter. However, saying that, at this point, Matt Sims also isn't winning football games, which in this league, if you have a quarterback that is winning your football games for you, that probably means that quarterback is good enough for the NFL, and you'll probably lose him soon enough anyways. So if he's not perfect, that's fine. You just need all the other units to do their job. You need an offensive line that'll be able to give him enough time to go through his progressions. You need wide receivers that'll actually catch the ball that hits them in their hands. Like one stat that I looked up, Shontavious Jones for the Legends has the most targets in the Alliance. He's been targeted 23 times this year. He has 10 catches. 10. In terms of yards, Matt Sims is third in the league in terms of yards. And that's with all the drops that they've had. So if the wide receivers actually caught the balls, he might be number one. I couldn't go into it as far, but all those drop passes are a very big problem if you're, I mean, this is sounding like Madden. You got to catch the ball to be able to move the ball forward. Yeah, a terrible Madden impression. I'm sorry, but so Matt Sims is third in the league. He's over Luis Perez. Luis Perez is fifth. Now they have a much better running game with with their running back. I can't believe I'm blanking his name. He's like the number one star in the Alliance right now. Trent Richardson. I can't believe I blanked that. They have a much better running game with Trent Richardson, even though he's not the leading rusher in the league right now. That's the Commandos, Stanton. So they have a bit more balanced of offense. Gilbert is the number one in terms of yards quarterback, and he also has the highest passer rating in the league right now. Wolford was number 3 and is now number 4. But I think that's because he missed some of this week and he might miss some of next week. So he might wind up being behind for the entire season because Trevor McKnight will play at least a little while. But right now, Matt Sims is the third, in terms of yardage, he's the third best quarterback. Now, what I see in Sims is he is unsure of where he's going with the football. He does not throw any balls with definition. In one pass that happened right in front of me in front of my season tickets, he threw a pass where the receiver was wide open in the corner of the end zone. If he just threw it maybe half a second to a second earlier and threw the ball through the receiver open, it would have been a complete pass. It would have been a touchdown. This was on the first drive of the game, and they wound up going for it, and they didn't get it. And the ball just bounced off a defender's back of his head. So he's doing a lot of not anticipating his throws and planning where to throw the ball. He seems very unsure of himself in the pocket. Now, is that having to do with the fact that the offensive line is Swiss cheese and he never knows when he might have to run? I don't know. I'm not out there on the playing field. So I don't think Matt Sims is the problem. But I don't think there's time. I don't think they should give him more time. I was one of the fans in the stands cheering for Aaron Murray to come in, mainly just because you need to see something change. At this point, I would even say Denard Robinson had a pass attempt. It wasn't a very good one because it wasn't a very good design play, but that's probably because of the offensive coordinator who just resigned. So you have your second off, you'll be on your third offensive coordinator in a 3-week league, in 3 weeks of a league so far. So that's not a good sign. Maybe hire a the suggestion I put on Instagram was Brian Bohannon from Kennesaw State. He runs a triple option offense. If anyone's seen Kennesaw State, I only use that because it's my alma mater, and I remember exactly the style of offense that they run, which is essentially a triple option. But another idea was just any triple option offensive coordinator. Just have them come in and install that, and just have Denard Robinson at quarterback. Because honestly, right now, whatever they're trying is not working. The defense is actually not that bad. Now, I guess the 28 points and the 40 points would say opposite, but that's because we also don't have any run defense. But we have pretty good safeties and cornerbacks. They are getting interceptions. They are getting batted down balls, but we're not stopping the run at all. And part of that is the tackling. In terms of in-game experience, I love the stadium. I've been in that stadium for Atlanta Braves games many times. This is the second football game I've attended there. So stadium is fine. Food and concessions lines were really long. So I really hope they fix that. Luckily I was able to tailgate and had a bunch of fun with other Legends fans out in the tailgate area. And the tailgating was awesome. So I got all my food in before that, but then the in-game experience in terms of trying to get food was not good. You couldn't. I tried to go get food at halftime, and the lines were insane. And there were people standing in line instead of watching the game. I was like, no, I'm gonna watch a game. I'm here for football, not for food. So if you come to an Atlanta Legends game, make sure to eat before. Do not plan on buying your food at the game. I know that's a big revenue share, but if they really wanted, they would somehow figure out some way to get the food processed faster. I don't know what the problem was. Another problem was they handed out the schedule, the schedule for the Legends, and apparently they are playing themselves twice. Like next weekend, where they're traveling to the Hot Shots, they're actually playing themselves. Come on. Does nobody proofread before they start handing these things out? I was like, okay, it would really suck if you made all these really nice schedules and then you made them and then you proofread it and like, oh wait, we're playing each other ourselves twice. Let's not hand this out. Yeah, you would lose the money and the cachet of not having a schedule to hand out, but you also wouldn't embarrass yourself by handing out a schedule that no one proofread before handing it out. It baffles the mind. I don't even know. Another thing, one thing I can give props for, they gave all the season ticket holders a flag. I got one. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. I live on a third floor apartment, so I don't have a flagpole. I plan on buying a house in May, so maybe I'll use it out there. We'll see about that. So that's enough to talk about the Legends. Hopefully, I'm really hoping the Legends stick around for another year and they can hire a new coach, a new head coach, all new coaching staff. They're going to have to gut the coaching staff and just start over. Now, I hope that they'll leave them in Atlanta and give them an option. There was about approximately, I can't remember the exact number, but there was approximately 10,000 fans there from the announced attendance during the game, which is not as good as some of the other, like it's not as good as San Antonio, but San Antonio has an indoor stadium, so that makes it very nice. But from what I can see in some of the other games, that's about comparable to the rest of the league. Hopefully it stays that way. One thing I know about Atlanta, being an Atlanta native, sports fans in Atlanta are very fickle. If you are not winning, if you are not a good product, they will not come. They have to hear something about the game. And some of the things that the fact that the team is terrible, and the fact that they don't even proofread their schedules. I mean, I don't like broadcasting this, but I have to because it's happened. I'm not going to blow smoke up their butts just because I wish they stick around for at least one more year with a proper coaching staff to see if it'll survive. Now, with the new chairman being from Raleigh, North Carolina, and owner of the Carolina Hurricanes, if they do move a team, of course Atlanta would be the first choice and be the Raleigh Legends. And on a personal level, I really hope that doesn't happen because I still want to go to spring football and I don't want to drive all the way to Raleigh to be a Legends fan. So I'd probably have to become a Birmingham Iron fan or Orlando Apollo. Well, actually, no, Orlando's even farther than Birmingham, so I'd have to go to Birmingham, or I would just never be able to go to a game. So on a purely personal note, I really hope they stick around. I hope the league survives for as long as they can, and I hope that they leave the team in Atlanta for at least a few more years. So that's enough on that game. So in the final game in San Diego, the Commanders went in and lost to the Fleet. So the Fleet, I didn't watch as much of this game because I wound up going out with some friends after the Legends game. I did watch some of the highlights, and it wasn't a very entertaining game from what it looked like. But the West is turning out to be very interesting. It's much more competitive than the East because the East, there's just Memphis and Atlanta that are honestly terrible. And then you have a shootout between the Iron and the Apollos. And when they first play, that is going to be a barnstormer of a game. I can't wait for that matchup. So let's talk about week 4. Coming up. The Fleet travel to Memphis, and that'll be the 4:00 Saturday game. That's going to air on BR Live. The Apollos are going to be playing the Stallions. They're going into Utah to play the Stallions. That's going to be on at 8 at NFL Network. So that's going to be an interesting game because that'll be a very cold Utah game. And we'll see if the weather conditions slow down the Apollos offense at all. And also, since the Stallions look good against the Hot Shots this past week, so we'll have to see how that works out. It really does seem like home field advantage, unless your team is terrible, really actually affects something. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Now, the Commanders go into Birmingham to play the Iron in the 4:00 Sunday game. That's going to be on CBS Sports Network. I really do think the Iron is probably going to be 4-0 after this week. I don't think the Commanders have the offense or the defense really to slow down Trent Richardson or Luis Perez and Patton, that passing team between those two. So I do think the Iron will win. And then the Legends go to play Arizona Hotshots. They're not playing themselves. If you went to the Legends game, no, they are traveling to Arizona to play the Hotshots. They're not playing the Atlanta Legends is not playing the Atlanta Legends. Just to make sure that you know that. Just make sure. So I'm very excited to see those. The really good games are going to be the Fleet Memphis game. Like the Saturday games are the most exciting ones. Those are going to be the most interesting. The Sports Network, the Sunday games, not as interesting. I did actually find out. This is a completely different topic. I was very disappointed with the Alliance of American Football app. I've mentioned it on the podcast before that I am not a huge fan of how they designed the app and how it's essentially just a mini game. I did get a chance to try it during the game. It works better when you're at the game. That's the good thing. It still wasn't engaging for me, though. It brought my attention away from the game too much, in my opinion. Now, I'm different than a lot of people. I'm more like you guys. I like to analyze what I'm watching and pay attention to the game itself. I don't want to be playing a game while also watching a game, even if it's tied into itself. So what I wound up deleting it off my phone completely because it's not really worth the time. I have another streaming service. I use PlayStation View, and I'm able to stream the actual television broadcast on my phone. So the app doesn't really serve a purpose for that. There's no fantasy football on the app in like a DraftKings daily fantasy way. I was able to find, if anyone is interested in playing Alliance daily fantasy football, I did find a website that offers Alliance Football Daily Fantasy. That's called, this is not a promotion. They are not paying me. I'm not making any money on this podcast right now. It's called fanball.com. If you want to check it out, I'm going to play it because I personally love DraftKings. I usually play in a season-long fantasy league, and then also play DraftKings for the NFL and NASCAR. I don't play any other fantasy sports besides those, but I do enjoy daily fantasy for those two sports. So check it out, have fun. If that seems interesting to anybody. So let's move on to some of the announcements in the XFL. They're starting to announce coaches, and they have some big names. In Seattle, they announced that Jim Zorn is going to be the Seattle coach, which is a little surprising considering he's a former Redskins head coach. So I thought maybe they'd be the DC franchise, but I think maybe they thought there was maybe too much bad blood in the DC area for him to coach another DC area team. So maybe that's why he's going to Seattle. I don't know much in terms of personal life about Jim Zorn, like whether he lives in Washington State, which if he lives in Washington State, maybe that's why. But I don't know if that's the reason. Pep Hamilton, former Stanford, Colts, Browns, Michigan, all those offensive and assistant head coach, whatever that means. I would say offensive coordinator still. He's going to be the DC head coach to play at the Audi field, I believe, the DC United's field. And I think I brought this up last week. Bob Stoops, former Oklahoma head coach, is going to be the head coach of the Dallas team. So they have good coaches. I hope they don't take up all the good coaches so the Legends can hire somebody that's of use, someone who actually knows how to coach football. So that's what's going on with the XFL right now. Haven't heard a whole lot about other things with the XFL, but this week was the first time. Now, I've been an arena football fan since about 2001 when I went to the inaugural game of the Georgia Force. I didn't get season tickets then, but a couple years down the road, I wound up getting season tickets, and I watched arena football for years. And the IFL had started, I believe they started 2008. I don't know much about the IFL, but I decided when I started this podcast what leagues I wanted to cover and which ones are worth people's time. And I chose the IFL as one of them that I really do believe is on the same level as, I believe they're just the same level of talent as the Arena Football League and the National Arena League. I have watched more of the National Arena League than I have the IFL. But this week I watched 3 of the 4 IFL games from start to finish. And then one of the IFL games, I watched the highlights of it and checked the stats. So let me go through these. San Diego Strike Force. They went into Quad City and played the Steamwheelers. Steamwheelers won 67-49. Now, Steamwheelers or Strike Force is an expansion team. So I'm not surprised that they lost. They didn't look terrible. I have to say one thing. This was the first game I watched, so most of the game I was actually trying to learn the differences between the Arena Football League that I'm used to and the IFL, some of the rule changes and stuff. I really love 2-man in motion, and I really love the fact that the shotgun is used a lot more in the IFL, and that the running game actually seems like an important part of the IFL game as opposed to the Arena Football League, where it's always in the pocket and quick passes or long passes and hardly no running game. So there's a much better balance and closer comparison to the outdoor game within the IFL, which I really enjoy. I really enjoy that it's slightly different. Now, if any of you have watched more of the IFL, please let me know. But is the IFL ball smaller than an official ball, or is that just an optical illusion with the 4 different colored panels? Because it really does look like the ball itself is like a peewee size ball. It looked very small in the quarterback's hands. And maybe that's like kind of hiding how poor passing the quarterbacks are. Let me know if you know the official size. I even downloaded the official rule book to try to find the dimensions of the football, which I couldn't find. I found how that it's made by Baden, and I looked on Baden's website to see if you could buy an IFL football, which you can't. And then it also said what PSI it should be left pumped to. So if you have any information on whether the IFL football is actually smaller than an arena or NFL football, I already know it's smaller than the CFL football because the CFL football is bigger than even the NFL. But let me know if any of you have found out. I'd be very interested to hear. The next game I watched was by far the most entertaining game. It was the closest and tightest competition. The Sioux City Storm went into, I don't even remember, the River Kings. I don't even remember what city they're from. Grand Rapids, I think. I'm sorry. I'm getting used to all these IFL teams, but I'll get better through the season. I promise. I barely know any of the players' names, but I'll definitely do some more research for next week. The Sioux City Storm, they won on a field goal right at the end of the game. That was a very entertaining, traditional. What I think of when I think of arena football or indoor football, as it were in this case. That's the type of game that I imagine. Um, the game I didn't get to watch much of was the Bismarck Bucks and the Nebraska Danger, mainly just because I kind of started watching it, but the fact that they didn't have the scoreboard up for most of the game, it took me out of the game a little. I really enjoy when I'm watching it on a screen to have a scoreboard so I can follow along exactly what's happening. So that's why I cut it off and then watched highlights later. Nebraska Danger's offense looks good. But again, beginning of the season of a football league, you don't really know exactly. And I'm still learning the IFL game as opposed to the arena game. Now, the Arizona Rattlers went into the Green Bay Blizzard and beat them 51-21. So that was a complete beatdown at home, at going into their house and just beating them to hell. Now, I've known that the Arizona Rattlers are a fantastic football team from the Arena Football League, and they've won a couple United Bowls now in the IFL. So I guess they're just keeping going with how fantastic they are. So that's interesting to see. That they used two different quarterbacks. I guess there's a quarterback competition going on right now between those two. But all in all, let me just say I am very happy with the coverage that they are providing with the IFL. And I very much enjoy the game, having never watched a full game, having never followed it for a while. I enjoy the game in the fact that it's like arena football mixed with CFL football. Like there's certain rules, like if you fail to advance it out of the end zone on a kickoff, you get a rouge, which is similar to the CFL rule, obviously adapted to indoor. Like it has more connection to the CFL game. With the two wide receivers in motion, a lot of the plays look very similar to CFL plays. I can see why a lot of players from the IFL wind up going to the CFL, because that's one thing I noticed covering the CFL, that IFL players would move up to the CFL a lot more than arena football players would. And I didn't know exactly why that was. As someone who didn't watch IFL, I always assumed that it was because they've improved their quality of player, which they clearly have. But then they also are playing a game that very much adapts itself to Canadian style football, even though it's still 4 downs as opposed to 3 downs. But the plays are very similar. It's just smaller. So the National Arena League and the Arena Football League are much more American football, and then the IFL is kind of Canadian football. And it's very interesting. I'm very excited to watch the rest of this season and actually follow a whole season of the IFL. So I'm very glad I decided to check out those games. The YouTube streaming was fantastic. And being able to go back and watch the games as many times as I want. I wasn't able to watch some of them live, but I was able to go back the next day and sit down and watch all the way through the entire games, and I had a fantastic time. I'm very much looking forward to this season. So week 2 of the IFL, the Nebraska Danger go to the Green Bay Blizzard, so that'll be an interesting game. See how the Danger can do at 1-0, go into the Blizzard, see if the Blizzard can slow them down and do better than they did against the Arizona Rattlers. This will be the first time we'll see the Iowa Barnstormers this year. They're going to travel to go see the Steam Wheelers. That's going to be an interesting game because the Steam Wheelers allowed the Strike Force to score 49, and I'm assuming the Barnstormers are going to have a better offense than the expansion. The Barnstormers are going to have a better offense in the expansion strike force. So we'll see how that that one I expect another traditional arena football style game where it's just back and forth, like almost like a basketball game where you just score, 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 score. So we'll see how that goes. The River Kings will go into play. The River Kings will travel to Arizona to play the Rattlers. That I don't think will go well for the River Kings. They've already lost at home. And the Rattlers look fantastic, like they always have, as far as I've known. And then the Sugar Skulls, Tucson, the other Arizona team, is going to go play the San Diego Strike Force. That'll be interesting because it's two expansion teams that are in the western part of the league, and we'll just have to see how it goes because they're two expansion teams. We're not sure. We can't really judge the teams yet until the end of the season early. So those are the 4 games for that week, for next week. It was very nice catching up on all this football. I watched so much football this weekend. There were 8 games across the 2 leagues that are playing right now to watch, and it's only going to ramp up more as we're getting closer to the National Arena League kicking off and the Arena Football League. There's announcements coming out about the Columbus Destroyers. Hopefully they'll announce the Atlantic City team's name in the Arena Football League yet. I've been seeing a lot of news about the Orlando Predators coming back in the National Arena League. It's really starting to ramp up this time of year, and soon we'll be getting closer to May and June, and training camps for the CFL will be starting up, and then we'll be going right into the National Football League, which I will not be talking about that because they get enough coverage as it is. So this is a great time to be a football fan, a diehard football fan. And I'm fantastic that you decided to share some of this with me. So have a good night. We'll talk to you next week after all the fantastic games that are coming up this weekend. And enjoy the football, everybody. Thanks.